So the first question that I'd really like to get into is, you know, how are these interviews different than some vanilla data science interview, maybe in on the East Coast or in the Midwest, like where I am? So that's
Yeah,
both in a startup and in one of these larger tech forward companies.
yeah, definitely. I would say that I'm not entirely sure what the vanilla data science interview is like, but I would preface that I think that the FAANG companies and the startups, they're a little bit different in that the FAANG companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google, etc., they definitely have a more structured interview process, and this is compounded by the fact that they just have so many data points on they like on the interviews, right? The data scientists that work there craft these very specific kind of interviewing guidelines, probably across the board as well, not just for data scientists, but for engineers, marketing, product, etc. But specifically within data science, they have these problems that effectively demonstrate where you fall in relation to other candidates that have also interviewed, right? And so you'll likely be graded on some sort of rubric or point scale, and then depending upon what percentile you are and for your level and your experience, that's usually how they actually then decide whether to give you the offer or not. And so I would say that like one of the most important things there is to like focus on practicing, the problems that are actually asked at those companies and getting like an understanding of what that whole interview is like because of the fact of how systematic it is and just generally pretty structured in general. I think in terms of the startup companies definitely are a little bit more varied in the fact that they have a lot of different kinds of interviews, and they have a lot of different kinds of data scientists that work there, right? And I think one of their key points is that because they're startups, they want to interview you based on what their kind of business is. And so if it's like a more financial, like fintech business, then they'll probably want like more experience from their candidates within that space, given that they probably have more of a predisposition for people within the same background. And then also they do a lot more kinds of take-home challenges or specifically interview questions just regarding the space that they're in. And the reason for this is because of the fact that I think they want to give the candidate a little bit more of an idea of what like the interview is actually like and the job is actually like. And I'd say that the take-home challenges do a lot of the times represent what the job is actually like, because a lot of the data scientists just like take some data from their database. They might clean it a little bit, but then they'll like feed it to the candidate and just kind of ask them to solve a problem that they maybe not be able to solve or just have solved in the past. And while that's maybe not necessarily like fair in any other kind of way, I would say that that's kind of what it's like because of the fact that startups are so kind of varied and don't really have a set structure because they just don't have enough data points to understand how it is to actually hire a large amount of data scientists or just a few data scientists.
Awesome. I think that is very informative. I did not personally know quite a bit of that information. So, let's focus on FAANG a little bit more here. And, you said the interview process is a lot more structured. When someone's interviewing at those companies, what could they generally expect to see? Are they going to get the technical screens? Are they going to, how many interviews? What does that generally look like?
Yeah, I would say it's usually always started with a kind of like a recruiter screen where they'll basically ask you a little bit more about your background. This is basically where they do like most of the kind of like red flag checks where they're trying to see if you can pass and just talk and communicate with the recruiter, that you're not someone who's super rude and just like an asshole on the job. And then just generally that your experience matches what your resume at that point, right? And then usually it's then followed on by like a technical screen or a hiring manager screen where they just talk to you and they try to then prove that you can pass the baseline in terms of technical knowledge. And this can be in either a form of just like machine learning and product case questions in which they're asking you about your experience or just giving you an example case for business. And then usually followed by like a SQL, Python, or coding challenge that is like around 30 minutes, in which they'll ask you to like solve a problem and show that you can that you have these data analysis or coding skills. And then finally, it's like an on-site interview where they'll basically talk to you, for the full span of a day about all of those kinds of different topics and jump into all the kind of varying like data science topics that are out there. And so it usually be like some combination of like statistics, machine learning, modeling, et cetera.
Awesome. Can you go a little bit more in depth into perhaps like the types of questions that you might be asked for technical questions specifically?
Yeah, I would say that data science interviews are so hard because they combine probably around like 8 or 9 different topics, kind of depending on which kind of role that you're seeking. And so out of all the positions, right, if your job is more focused on, let's say, data analysis, and you're like more of a data analyst, product analyst, then you're going to see yourself being faced with more questions around product cases, product intuition. And examples like this are, let's say, Facebook likes are down by 10%. What do you do? And so that's more about like investigating analytics and being able to figure out what you do before diving into the data. And then also like, business cases and then SQL kind of problems are also pretty similar for like the data analyst side. On more of the kind of data science machine learning side, you're going to see more case questions around modeling and machine learning. And so examples of this are being able to differentiate between 2 different models, or so being able to say like, what's the difference between linear regression and random forest regression, right? And so this is just them being able to understand how well these topics intrinsically and almost from an academic sense. And then usually they'll go into also another case problem that will be then machine learning focused on a actual problem statement. And so that will be more of like the modeling scenarios, such as, we need to build a model for XYZ, like how would you build it? And then it's then about talking about that whole process. And then lastly, I think sprinkled in between, there's a lot of probability questions, statistics questions, and then generally some coding question as well, just to understand your baseline level of coding. And I think both of those, or all of those topics, are generally kind of interweaved as well a lot of the time. So you'll see a problem that's focused on statistics, and then they might ask you to like code up how you would actually showcase that distribution, right? And so I think it's definitely tough because there's so many different things to study, but that's kind of why data science is also pretty interesting and pretty varied across each and every role.